Okay, so we're reading Foucault, The Body of the Condemned, and one of the things that I want to just emphasize about that particular reading is that you're going to need to reread sections. It's not the kind of reading that you're going to understand everything in the first read through. So just saying that, if you've started reading it and you're like, whoa, what is this? There's a lot of new vocabulary, I'm not sure what he's doing here, that's okay. Right? That what I'm asking you to do for Friday is a first read through. And then next week we're actually going to be practicing a second read through to look at what you can get from a second read through of a text like this. But what we're going to look at today, a question that we want to try to answer, is what is the author's purpose? So in other words, right, what is Foucault's purpose? Why is he writing this? Why did he bother to prepare this entire book called Discipline and Punish, right? Why did he write this chapter? Yeah, Ronald, you had a question?
Basically, he was trying to point out the reform of the prison, how the prisons changed from like back in the day, how they tortured people, to this primitive prison.
Right, so great, Ronald. So you've already picked up on that one of the reasons he's writing this is that he wants us to look at the change in punishment, right? So what I'm going to talk about today are some of these major changes in punishment that he wants us to really pay attention to in this particular chapter. And I think as Ronald started to talk about this, right, that in the 1700s, around the time that our Constitution was being written, people were punished publicly. They were dragged out into the public square and very violently, things that we would consider torture today. We read the first opening part of that chapter, The Body of the Condemned, where we get a graphic description of someone whose legs and arms are being torn off of him, right? That this is a very physically painful kind of punishment. And so he wants us to pay attention to that kind of change, right? That we punish people today, but not in that same way. And so one of the first ways, right, that he talks about this change in punishment is he points out that it's no longer a public spectacle, that our punishment is not happening at noon in the town square with an audience, right? So I'm just going to mark that up here. Right, that it's no longer a public spectacle. And one of the things that this means is that the effectiveness of the punishment is going to change. And what I mean by that is that if you're publicly torturing criminals or someone who's committed whatever is considered to be a crime at that time, and you do that publicly, right, that the people watching that experience that pain in a certain way, right? That if you're in the audience there, you're hearing the screams, you're smelling the burning flesh, right? It's a very, it's not just about the person being punished. It really has an effect on the people watching it. And so one of the things that I think Foucault wants us to notice is that because punishment isn't public in that way anymore, it doesn't necessarily have the same effect. Right? It might still have an effect, but work in a different way. Now it's more abstract. It's not something that each of us necessarily sees and experiences in the public square. It's something that we know that punishment is going to happen, right? Or that it's a possibility that it might happen if we each commit a crime, right? But it's just knowing the sort of certainty of punishment, right? That works today, that might prevent someone from committing a crime. It's not that necessarily people have experienced watching the public beating of someone that's going to discourage them. It's just sort of knowing that there is a punishment out there, but not having experienced or watched that publicly. So that the severity of the punishment isn't really the motivating factor today, right? That there are other things that might motivate us not to commit crime, but it's not knowing that our arms and legs will be torn off, right? But also Foucault he says the object of punishment has changed, meaning that the focus of the punishment has changed. And again, Ronald mentioned this briefly, right, when you said what is his purpose, right? Before, right, the focus was very much on the body, causing physical pain to the body, right? That's why we're ripping off someone's arms and legs before killing them, because the purpose was actually not just to kill them in the public square, but to inflict as much pain as possible on their physical body. And now, again, the punishment is a little more abstract. Now we're trying to maybe get at the internal side of things, right? We're modern day, yeah. So where we're talking about, and he says this shift happened somewhere in the 1800s, early 1900s, right? That this public spectacle of, punishing someone's body physically was something that had ended primarily by the end of the 1700s. Okay, that as we move into the 1800s, we see less and less of this kind of punishment, and more of a focus on punishing someone internally. And he uses the word the soul, right? Yeah, Ronald.
Can you give me a layman's term for abstract?
Oh, great question. So what do I mean by abstract? I mean something that is known in your head, right? But is not something that you can, it's not a physical object. It's not something that you can pick up and move around. It's something that you could... It's not something that you would... It's not physical in the same way. It's less seen, but it's also... right, to punish someone's soul, right, it's harder to actually experience that or see that. Right, whereas punishing someone's body, that's a very concrete kind of punishment. That's, if you rip off someone's arm and you watch that, you're like, oh, okay, yes, that was physical punishment. Where it's a little bit more complicated to figure out, how do I punish someone's soul, right? That's more, or how do I punish their character or the things that are happening on the inside of them, right? That's different. But that this shift, right, from the physical body to something that's more internal, like the soul, right? This is one of his one of the ideas that he spends a fair amount of time discussing in this chapter. And so, right, when we notice that prison, right, because we're talking about prison in this class and not just punishment, but that prison is really being, built and expanded to get at this new kind of punishment. Right? That prison is about, okay, we're not going to take you out in the public square and just rip off your arms and legs, but we're going to put you in a cell so that we can really focus on punishing more internally. Things like taking away someone's rights. Yeah.
Prison is basically to punish the soul.
Right. So this is where prison comes in, is much more focused on that internal punishment, whereas punishment in the town square, where you're ripping off, ripping out someone's intestines, right? It's much more bodily harm. You don't need a prison to do that if it's happening publicly. And it doesn't happen over years. It's just a one-time event, right? And then it's over. So before, right, that there might have been also, when this punishment is more on the body, right? Someone might have asked, if there's a crime committed, what does the law say? What did the person do? And if they, violated the law, then they were punished. And there was no mitigating circumstances. There was no, let me try to understand why they committed this crime, or let me try to understand what their state of mind was, right? It's very much like, what's the law? What did the person do? If they violated the law, then that's the punishment.
So
yeah.
Wasn't there judges in that?
Well, yeah, there may have been judges, but what I'm saying is that the ways that punishment was assigned to people, a judge would not take into consideration why someone committed the crime or what their state of mind was or whether they were likely to do it again. right? That those are all concepts that are new, that kind of correspond with this focus on looking to punish the internal parts of a person. So this whole concept of, is someone mentally ill or not, right? And should that have an impact on their punishment? That is a new concept, right? That has to do with where we're looking at internally what's going on with a person. This idea that, the punishment should ideally stop you from hurting other people, not just be a punishment for you or for the person committing the crime. So this concept that we might let someone out early for good behavior in prison, right? This is this whole concept that we're now trying to look at some of the circumstances around why the person committed the crime. So the other piece here, right, we're trying to disconnect today pain from the physical body and trying to make pain more focused on the internal. And one way to do that is through technology that has developed. And it may not seem like are you guys familiar with the guillotine, chop off people's head? When I first say that, I don't know that people think, oh, that's such a humane way of killing people. That's so painless, right? But actually, right, the guillotine was a technological development that made it killing someone faster and less painful, right, than this tearing their intestines out in the public square. So if we're looking at technology that helped make this transformation, right, things like the guillotine, right, actually was a piece of technology that helped make this transition away from just punishing someone's body. So that the guillotine was about doing something quick and fast, right, just chopping off the head and then it's done. It's not about first physically pouring hot wax in someone's wounds, right? It's just about chopping it off and then it's done. Right? Today we don't use that, but we do use, in states where capital punishment is legal, right, we often use lethal injection, which is even designed to be even less painful. Right? Someone is given a shot first to numb them so they don't feel the pain of dying, so that it's, today we're trying to even ease the pain of killing someone even more, so that it's just taking away their right to live. Right? We're trying to remove the rights that exist internally for a person, but without causing them a lot of bodily harm or pain. So the idea is that, right, with lethal injection, there's minimal physical pain before you die, but that we're still killing someone in order to inflict this sort of soul punishment of taking away someone's rights, or their right to life in that case. So let's come back around to what is Foucault's purpose, right? It's certainly to talk about these changes in the kinds of punishment that happened over time, but he's also trying to draw our attention to things that we may not be immediately aware of, right? That we may not be aware of the ways that punishment has changed over time. That prison is something today that is thought of as fairly natural and normal. Almost, it's always existed, right? And I think he's trying to point out it hasn't always been this way. There have been these changes over time. Things could change again. And I think it's also important to notice that he's not making an argument for or against the death penalty. He's not making an argument that what we have today is better than what was in the past. Right? He does mention that some people would say it's more humane today, but he's not taking a position. He's just saying, oh, let's look at these changes. Okay, but he's not necessarily agreeing or disagreeing with, whether one of these kinds of punishment is better than the other.
So his purpose was basically to show how the penal system changed, like the punishment from body to soul.
Yeah. So he's trying to point out that change exactly without taking a position about what's better.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Are there other questions? No? So what we'll do next